Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're still waiting for a few to come in, but we have about 25 registered for this great workshop this morning. We're so fortunate again to have Courtney Spencer back, but also very fortunate that KeyBank, who is our amazing workshop series sponsor, we have Abir here today to kick this off. So without further ado, welcome Abir to your first KeyBank workshop. We're glad to have you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber's Small Business Workshop. Again, my name is Abir Saab. I manage the KeyBank in here in the Clinton location, and it's an honor to represent KeyBank in today's session. KeyBank has been sponsoring this workshop series for the Chamber for several years now because we see it as an extension of what we do for the financial wellness of our small business clients every day. Like the Chamber, we view our role in the community as a strategic partner to businesses, helping them prosper by providing quality banking services to meet their financial needs. As a branch manager, I work with small businesses in our community every day on ways they can effectively manage operations and grow their business. Our Small Business Financial Wellness Review is an award-winning review tool that helps us guide a conversation with business owner, helping them to identify goals and build a plan for business success. If after today's presentation, you're interested in learning more about KeyBank's small business solution, I'd be happy to set up some time to speak with you. You can reach me through the Chamber. Also, Danielle has sent in the invite my contact information, and Sam Staley, who is the Centerbrook manager at KeyBank as well. So you'll have both our contact information, but I am going to stay here till the end. So if we need to schedule an appointment, I will be here for you to do that. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Courtney Spencer of Courtney Spencer Coaching. Courtney is an attorney, a transformational life coach, and a speaker with a passion to help people design a life that they love. She is a frequent speaker on topics of productivity, stress reduction, breaking through barriers, life design, and conquering busyness. She utilizes the skills that she has honed through 20 years of practicing law, as well as through her extensive coach training to help her clients make massive breakthroughs in their lives. Please join me in welcoming Courtney Spencer to present Breaking Bad Communication Habits by Motivating and Inspiring Employees. Courtney, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you for allowing these amazing and supporting these amazing seminars. I think it's great, and I wanted to thank everybody at the Chamber as well for having me back. So today we're going to talk about communication, particularly bad communication, and how to fix that, because communication is the key to having good, productive employees and relationships in general. I would love if you have specific questions, if you could pop them in the chat. I don't know if I can see the chat while I have full screen. So maybe somebody can let me know if there are comments while I'm doing this. Oh, I can see. Great. Just, obviously, if there's anything in particular that you've been struggling with that you want to make sure I cover, please pop that in the chat. Okay. All right. So you already heard about me. I'm an attorney. I'm a transformational life coach and a speaker. And I have had employees since 2008. And I have been a good manager and I've been a bad manager. I've been a good communicator and I've been a horrible communicator. So a lot of what I'm teaching you today, not only is through research and training, but also through life, the school of life. And I want to pass on to you some of the really good techniques that I've learned that have helped me not only as a boss, but also as a wife, as a mother, as a friend. Communication is just key. Okay, so how do I shift? Here we go. So why is communication important? Communication is the key to getting what you want and what you need in the world. It's the main form of human interaction. We communicate constantly. We're communicating with our words. I'm communicating with you right now with my words, but I'm also communicating you with my nonverbal language. You see that I am excited to be here, that I want to engage you, that this is an interesting topic to me. If I were to give the talk like this and tell you communication is important, you would be picking up different kinds of communication from me. The words are the same, but the body language is different. And that's the same for every interaction that you have as a human being. It's how we teach, lead, inspire. It's how we grow. It's how we get our needs met, both interpersonally, but also as a boss, as a supervisor. You have needs, you have projects that need to be done, you have things that need to be accomplished. They get accomplished by how you communicate with the people carrying out the tasks. And of course, it's the great connector. Because at the end of the day, whether you're talking about an employee or a relationship, it's about that human connection. And that human connection is what makes life worth living, those connections that we have with people. So important to really hone this skill, because if you can't get your needs met because you're not communicating effectively, if you're not leading, if you're not inspiring, you're not growing, and you're going to have a sense of dissatisfaction inside of yourself and not really understand why. So again, we talked about the different forms of communication. There's the verbal, the speaking, the nonverbal, which is your facial expression, eye contact, how you're holding yourself. And then of course, there's obviously visual communication as well. Being really clear on what mode of communication is right in the right situation is important. So if you're going to fire somebody, you don't do that in a text, right? If you need to simply give some quick information, you don't call the employee and have an hour-long sit-down meeting. So always being very aware of how you're communicating and the mode of communication. What is the cost of poor communication in business? I looked at these studies and I was shocked, but not surprised, I guess. One study found that 44% of employees say communication barriers have delayed or derailed projects. It's almost half of employees. Another study found that 57% of leaders don't give clear directions and 63% don't recognize employee achievements. 75% of employees leave their job because of poor management. A different study, which is a different talk I'm giving, is that 95% of people right now want to switch careers. 95%. Some of that has to do with things other than communication, but a lot of that has to do with people being in workplaces where they're not getting their needs met, where they're not clear on what's happening, what's expected of them, and it becomes very frustrating, where their bosses are not happy with them because there's a complete disconnect between what one person is expecting and what one person is hearing. So communication skills are huge. If you have bad communication in the workplace, your employees are going to quit. They're going to be unhappy. They're going to gossip with each other. They're going to gossip about you. I've had all of those things happen. And years ago, when I was an employee, I've done all of those things. So again, this is firsthand knowledge that I'm teaching you in addition to training and research. You're going to have conflict. The bottom line is going to be affected. Deadlines are going to be missed because directions aren't clear and deadlines aren't clear. The workplace will become unpredictable and uncomfortable. There's going to be a lack of collaboration, low morale, finger pointing, I didn't do it, you did it. Then you have your absenteeism, your tardiness, your employees are just not going to be super motivated, because even if they start off strong, like, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to rock this job. They don't know what the job is and they're not meeting your expectations. They're going to feel it and they're going to drop their productivity. Again, it's a disconnect. And what we're doing today is trying to bridge that disconnect to teach you how to clearly communicate so everybody's needs are getting met in the business sense. As a boss, you're not going to meet all of your employees' needs, but you're going to meet the one most important need, which is letting them know exactly what you expect of them and then giving them feedback that helps them become better. That's their main need as an employee. As an employer, your main need in the business sense is having staff that are reliable, dependable, honest, and do what you ask them to do. So those needs need to be met for a good workplace to happen. Examples of bad communication. Anybody ever have that boss that just won't communicate with you? They won't tell you what's going on. They want you to read their mind. When I was a newer attorney 20 years ago, that's how law firms are run. I think that's actually how a lot of them are run right now, which is basically you don't ask your boss a question unless you literally phoned every friend you knew, right? You just didn't do it. You figured it out and you came. Associates were to be seen and not heard, right? And I think a lot of businesses do run that way. There's intimidation, again, and I can only speak on the law aspect. You hand in your first writing piece to your boss and they red pen it and they throw it down at the table and they really think that this is a good way to motivate you to become a better writer. not being clear is just a problem. If you're vague, hey, Mary, I have this project and I want to get it done. And you don't want to be bothered. You're not taking the time to give the steps in the direction. Mary's probably going to do a different project than you want and hand it in at a different time than you want. And that's not Mary's fault in that situation, right? That's a lack of clear communication. Deadlines, got to have deadlines. Being passive aggressive. I'm guilty of this because not currently, but in the past, because I'm not a strong confrontational person unless I'm in the law practice. If I'm practicing law and fighting for kids or fighting a probate matter, I can be the toughest person you ever met. But in general, I don't like people being mad at me. So if I have an employee that makes a mistake, I really am not comfortable, even to this day, calling them in my office and telling them they made a mistake. But I've honed in on it, and I know how important it is to give positive, constructive feedback, because otherwise you're going to see the same mistake happen over and over again. But passive aggressive is, Mary didn't do what I asked, so mad at her, so I'm just going to, kind of be cold and distant, and maybe she'll figure it out, right? It's not super productive. I apologize. I have like a printer going off and a phone going off at the same time. Gossiping about employees with other employees. So saying to another employee, can you believe how bad Mary is? She comes in late every day. She's terrible. I can't believe this is happening, because you're frustrated and you want to share it with somebody. Using technical language. So if you have an employee that is new and you start throwing acronyms at them and technical language at them, they're not going to know what you're talking about. Or jargon, like lots of catchphrases. I had somebody work for me who had been taught that you never say problem, you say opportunity. To an extreme, to the point where actually during that period of time, I lost my grandmother, and she actually told me I was having an opportunity. So don't use jargon, don't use little catchphrases. It's not helpful. You be real, be authentic, be transparent. Lots and lots of trainings have gone on to teach people how to communicate badly. Let's kind of throw that out. Don't be a bully. And then there's the other issue of self-regulation and listening and being confident. So having a poor presence. So like if you're going to your employee, like, you're really wonderful. You're great. You totally screwed up this project and now we're getting sued, but you know what? You're a great employee. The sandwich theory. It's not good. How you hold yourself will impact how well and effectively the people around you hear what you're saying. Punitive, micromanaging, bad idea. Never do it. I've never done it. I can't stand micromanaging. I don't have the brain space to do that, but I've been micromanaged. And what it does is it serves to limit you. And it usually was done only by employers with big control issues. So they hired me. They knew I could do the job, but they micromanaged me and everybody around me to the point where it became like, why am I even here, right? Like if you're going to micromanage everything, you can do the job yourself. And then most importantly, recognizing the unique learning style and approval style for employees. So you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have people motivated by money, people motivated by fame. You have all kinds of things going on. And we'll talk about that later. So if you're complimenting somebody who doesn't like compliments, you're not going to understand why you're not getting anywhere. If you never compliment somebody whose main love language is words of affirmation, you're going to have a really sad employee. If you have an extrovert and you put them in a research lab or you put them behind the scenes and they don't interact with people, they're going to just burn out and fall flat. If you take an introvert and you put them at the front line of having to do lots and lots of interaction, they're going to burn out. So really understanding your employee's style and leveraging that is really the key to success. I learned that. I used to hire the extrovert as a paralegal or legal secretary because they're so charming in the intake and the initial interview. But the problem with some extroverts is they spend most of the day talking because that's a need they have. And I wasn't hiring the introverts because they'd come into the meeting and the initial interview and they would barely say anything. And I'm an extrovert, so I didn't understand that. And then I learned through time that because I'm an extrovert, I'm actually better suited to having introverts around me. I'm the big picture person. They're the people who can execute the fine-tuned details, and they don't need a lot of communication from me to do it. So why do we struggle? I can only speak from personal experience and what I've seen. For example, I was trained one way. So it's like, well, if it worked for me, it's going to work for you. I just figured it out. Especially any of us who own or run or manage, own or run a business or manage or in a supervisory position. To get here, we had to be extremely hard workers. We have to be bright people. We have to be successful. Not everybody's going to want to do that or have the capacity to do that, but we expect that they do. Fear of conflict, we talked about that, or confrontation. We have our own insecurities. So we will project onto our employees things that we think are happening that are not actually happening. Or we will feel so insecure, we'll start sort of demanding respect from somebody, and they're not really going to understand why, because we're working our own issues out on them. Lack of training. Most people don't get any management training at all. I never did. I went from being an associate in a law firm to owning a law firm. I never had any training except for learning what not to do. And that's actually how I run my law firm. I knew what I hated, and I just decided that was never going to happen in my office. I'm far from a perfect manager, but I've become a very successful one. And fear of being vulnerable, especially if you're at the top level, because again, we only get there by really being tough and pushing through. And it's very hard to then allow ourselves to be vulnerable, especially to people who we consider subordinate. How do strong leaders communicate? This is the way that it is. They're open to the views of their employees. They feel no need to demand to respect. They carry themselves with a calm confidence. They allow people to feel truly heard. They're in constant healthy communication, and they allow feedback. So if you do not want to hear from your employees, if you know you're doing something wrong, but you don't want to deal with it and you don't want to acknowledge it, then this seminar isn't going to help you. Because what we're really going to start to learn is our employees have the answers to our problems. It's the truth. They know what's working and what's not working. And if we are not open to hearing it, we will never change. And that's just a choice we can make. I didn't change for many years. It took many years of many employees to decide that, number one, my hiring was not where it needed to be. My training was not where it needed to be, and my reactions were not where they needed to be. And that was based on my own fear of confrontation. So all of those things have shifted to where I have an environment where expectations are clear, communication is solid, feedback is accepted and welcomed. And it's really important to be that kind of leader to your team. So how do you do it? How do you become a great communicator? How do you go from just being an average person to being a superhero communicator in your workplace? 3 C's. We're going to talk about specific skills, but they're boiled down to these 3 things: confidence, clarity, and compassion. If you don't have these 3 things, or you don't have the capacity to show and exude these 3 things, communication will fall flat. Because again, remember, it's not so much about what you say. It's more about how you're saying it. So it's that verbal, nonverbal. So confidence is, how do you carry yourself? Do you have an executive presence? Do you elicit respect just by walking in the room? And do you also make the person you're speaking to feel like they're the only person in the room, to feel heard, respected by you? That's confidence. Confidence is, I don't have to intimidate you into respecting me. I don't have to hide from you because I don't want to confront the situation. And anything you say, whether it's negative feedback to me or to the business or to something that's happening, isn't going to shake who I am or how I feel about myself. So I'm welcome to hear it, may not agree with it, but I'm welcome and open to hear it. So it's like an open place. Clarity is, it's clear. Be very clear with your employees. Number one, what's your mission? Why do you have employees? Why do you have a business? If you can't communicate that to your employees, you can't communicate that to your customers or clients, and your business will not be as successful as it can be. Second, what do you want from your employees? Why do you have them? Each employee serves a different role in your business, and they need to understand what is their role and why. Why are they important? What is the greater mission? And compassion. If you do all of this, but you have no compassion, and you don't know what's going on in your employees' lives, you're going to miss a lot of things. You know, if you have an employee, for example, who shows up 15 minutes late every day for 2 weeks, you can decide, okay, maybe they're not listening, they're violating protocol, they should be fired. Well, what if that employee's daycare opens later than it used to open, and this is the only daycare she can afford, and she's one of your best employees? If you didn't know that, you'd probably terminate. Very different than an employee who just has poor productivity and time management and can't get their act together. So you don't become codependent with your employees where you're taking care of every part of their lives, but you start listening and have compassion. If something isn't working, why isn't it working? And having that connection is so important. Okay, so what are excellent communication skills? Active listening, number one. I talked about, when you're speaking to somebody, making them feel like they're the only person in the room. Some of the most effective communicators in the world are described that way. These are very powerful, very influential people who will make you feel like you are the most important person when they're speaking to you. So what do we often do? Employees speaking to you, oh my God, you're checking your email, you're thinking about that next meeting, you're half listening to what they're saying, and then you kind of want them to just take care of everything and go. If instead you decide, okay, I'm going to have this time with this employee, nothing's going to distract me, and I'm going to actively listen, not just with my ears, but with my body. So again, listening is listening. Distraction looks like distraction. And the person who's communicating with you can tell the difference. Validating is huge. So we're going to talk a little bit later about what to do when there's a problem, either a problem that you're having with your employee or they're having with you, or you're having with your spouse. It doesn't matter. It's the same formula for everything. But validating is huge. So if your employee comes to you with a problem, even if you think it's ridiculous, you validate that they feel this is a problem. So you're not validating that it's accurate unless you agree with it, but you're validating that this is a problem for them. Mary, I hear you saying that you don't like the copy machine that we have and you'd like a high-speed copy machine. That seems simple, right? Maybe that's not what you feel. Maybe you don't have the budget for it, but you're acknowledging the problem. Mary, I hear you saying that Johnny is making inappropriate jokes and he is offending you. Again, you don't know yet what's happening. You still have to research, but you're validating. You're not saying, Johnny's great. I know what you're talking about. I've never heard that. You're not saying the copy machine's wonderful. I've never had a problem. If you're not going to validate what they're saying, your employee is not going to feel heard. So validation is huge. It's huge, again, in any relationship that you have. If you want to have effective communication, you have to master the art of validation. Clarifying. Mary, I think what I hear you saying is X, Y, and Z. So don't make assumptions. If an employee comes to you with a problem, do not make assumptions that you know what they're talking about. Actually determine and clarify what they are talking about. Positive feedback is huge. You don't make things up, obviously, but most employees do want some kind of accolade. They want some kind of attaboy, some kind of you did a great job. So find where you can compliment them, especially if you're having a tough discussion with them. Again, the sandwich method, compliment, jab, and compliment is not super, super effective because truthfully, the employee is only going to hear the negative, number one. And number two, you're going to water down your approach. But it is always very important to have the positive and the negative. Even if the employee has really nothing positive that you can come up with, you can always come up with something. And if this employee has nothing positive that you can come up with, this may not be a right fit for you. Follow through. If you say to an employee who's not having daycare issues, if you continue to show up late, there's going to be a consequence. And that could be a reduction in salary, it could be a demotion, could be a reduction in hours, or it could be termination. Be very clear that the consequence you're suggesting is something you're willing to follow through. If it's your best employee, you're probably not going to terminate them, but you can begin to instill consequences for rule violations that are legitimate and make sure they're legitimate. So if that employee is showing up 15 minutes late occasionally, but they're also the employee that stays 2 hours late without pay, you're going to want to talk about with yourself, picking your battles and deciding what makes the most sense in that situation. Again, working on strengths. If you have somebody who has particular strengths that offset your weaknesses, you really want to develop those strengths. And again, if you have an introvert in a position really made for extroverts, if you have a detail-oriented person in a big picture brainstorming position, you might want to think about tweaking where that person is best using their time and leverage their strengths, and do not give them a position that plays on their weaknesses. I can't do math. I'm a horrible mathematician. It's why I became a lawyer. You would not put me in bookkeeping or accounting. Would I work really hard and try? Yes. Would you get audited? Yes. Not a good idea. I'm an extrovert. You wouldn't put me in a research lab. You wouldn't put me behind the scenes. It's not where you would best use my abilities. Yes, I do have legal knowledge and I have intelligence and all of those things, but one of my strengths is my communication skills. So you'd put me in a position where I am communicating. And before I opened my law firm, that very often, way back when I was waitressing in college, I was the waitress that they brought in, they pulled from other tables when somebody else made a mistake. When somebody was really mad at their wait staff, they would bring me in. In my law practice early on, I would be given the most difficult clients. Not a lot of fun, but I do very well with difficult people. So my communication style is nurturing, it's clear, it's solid and strong. But I am not the person, again, you'd put in charge of the books. I'm not the person you'd put in charge of doing the picayune details of the day, because then I would become demotivated. I would still do my job, but I wouldn't be doing it to the best of my ability. And you all have strengths and weaknesses that you can imagine if somebody put you in a position that really just played on your weaknesses, you would lose morale. Confidence, we talked about, compassion, clear boundaries, plan consistent feedback sessions, very important. And most important is self-regulation. So what I learned most about working for other people is that there are people who take their bad days out on their employees. And that was never going to be me. I was never going to yell at an employee. My policy is if I have to yell at you, you shouldn't be working for me. I don't yell at employees. I don't degrade employees. I don't intimidate employees. Those are all things that I had experienced, maybe not directly to myself, but I've seen that happen to colleagues, and it is not good. And the reason you do it is because you are not self-regulated and you feel like this is an appropriate way to communicate. So for example, I always give this example. When I was a newer associate, an attorney in the office missed a court date. They missed it, they made a big mistake, and the court granted them a new court date. Fine, had nothing to do with me. They came in and I was the first person they saw, and they said, you're gonna go to court next Friday, you're gonna handle this. And he's yelling this at me and explaining this, not even explaining the situation, but just demanding that I do that. I said, I'm really sorry, I have a court date on the matters that I'm handling on that date. And he threw the file, not at my head, but pretty close to my head, right? He lost it. He got in trouble, of course, but I mean, that's a lack of self-regulation. There was nothing that I had done wrong. And even if I was the one who missed the court date and I was the one who missed the deadline and I was the one practicing in that area, you still have no right to throw objects, right? That's a lack of self-regulation, and that showed up over and over again with this particular person. Yelling, screaming, blustering. Wasn't effective. His staff didn't respect him. He didn't get his needs met because he couldn't control himself. So if you find yourself feeling like you need to yell at an employee, ask yourself, what's going on? What am I not addressing in my own life? And why do I feel that I can do this? Because it's never really appropriate in the workplace to be a bully. And I've worked for bullies, so I know they're prevalent out there. I'm not saying any of you are, and maybe some of you have worked for people like that. But self-regulation of controlling your own emotions, your own reactions is huge. Your employees need to learn that as well. But it starts with you. Everything always starts from the top. You're modeling the expectation of what you want. So if you are losing your cool and you are not regulating yourself, you are creating an atmosphere where nobody has to and nobody's expected to, and very often an atmosphere of fear and lack of respect for you. Just very important. Okay, so how do you bring excellent communication into your business? You have a culture of open communication. Very hard to do, especially if you have some employees that you know aren't going to say wonderful things. But if you have a culture of open communication, you have an open door policy, you allow people to share their concerns, their ideas, the whole atmosphere shifts. And you control the atmosphere. If you're at the top, if you're a manager, supervisor, CEO, owner of a business, you set the atmosphere of your business. How you carry yourself, what your expectations are will trickle down. I see this as a special education attorney, I see this all the time in schools. The quality of a school is 100% dependent on the principal. 100%. If you have a wishy-washy principal, you have a completely disconnected school. Teachers don't know what they're doing. There's no collaboration. It's a mess. If you have too authoritarian a principal, everybody's scared and terrified and nobody's speaking, and it's a mess. If you have that perfect balance of authority, respect, and compassion, you have a well-run school every time. And it's the same thing for business. If you can carry yourself in a way that is confident, that is clear, and that allows people to have open communication and vulnerability, you are going to be successful. And if you do all of those things and the employee still isn't working, then it's an employee problem, not you. Welcoming new ideas. You're not going to have innovation in your business if you don't welcome new ideas. If people are afraid to tell you, you know what, I know we've always done it this way, but here's a new way. It's not going to happen if you don't welcome new ideas. I like to give the example that when I was a newer associate years ago, we didn't have any kind of centralized computer database system. And everything was really hard. And I had a lot of clients and we had to recreate everything constantly. There was no connection between employees. So I went to my boss and I said, okay, I'm overwhelmed. There's too much going on. We can't communicate with each other. I think what we need is a really good consultant to come in and give us good systems. His response was to send me to an all-day time management seminar. So I had no time. I was completely stressed out. He didn't hear me. I lost a whole day. And all that I learned was I don't bring new ideas to my boss. I don't. Because if I bring new ideas to my boss, the consequence is I lose time. That's a problem. Allow two-way communication. And again, be very clear on your mission. So it doesn't matter if you make widgets for a living, right? We learned in business school, everything's about making widgets. What you're actually doing is creating a product that helps other people do something, have easier lives, have more effective machines, whatever it is. Your mission is always underneath what you do. So as an attorney, our mission is to help people. It's to help children with disabilities on the special education end, to help those children have the lives that they were created to live, regardless of their disabilities. It's to give excellent, excellent, excellent service to everybody who comes across our door. Same as an estate planning attorney. Our job is to deliver excellence, to deliver wonderful customer service, to have people leave us grateful that they met us. As a transformational coach, my mission is to help people have the very best lives that they can have by breaking barriers. So everybody who works with me is clear on the mission, and the mission is always excellent, excellent customer service. That's one of the top missions. So everybody who works with me knows that that's really what we're doing. Listen and validate. We talked about that before. So hearing people what their concerns are, hearing people what their ideas are, hearing people discussing different ways of doing things. So important. And then, of course, understanding generational and cultural differences. I, again, was trained as an attorney in a time, I'm a product, I was born in 1975, so I was raised in the 80s. And that was when children were seen and not heard. We didn't have helicopter parents. Pretty much our parents, just as long as you were alive, you were good. And bosses were the same way. It was that tough love. This is how we do it. The new generations will not respond to that. They just won't take it. They won't tolerate it. They can't tolerate it. It's not an effective way of working with millennials or the new generations that are coming up. So deciding, okay, I'm going to learn more about how millennials are motivated, because they job hop like crazy. They are one of the first generations that really understood you don't have to stay at a job forever, and you don't have to take, types of bosses that you can't handle. But they also have immense skill. So we want to keep these millennials, right? So learning different ways of communicating with somebody who's a lot younger than you and who was raised in a different generation is very important. They are more likely to communicate by technology and not in person. Understanding that they are not going to respond well to a punitive approach. It's not going to be effective for that generation. They need more validating often, because that is actually the best way to communicate. So they are breaking old generational patterns of bossing that are actually good. They are making us aware of the fact that you can actually have a hard job and a great quality of life. These are important things. You can work really, really hard, but also enjoy your workplace and enjoy the people you're working with. And cultural differences. I can't even name all the cultural differences that you could face. You really got to know who you're working with and understand and respect them and how they view the world, because we view the world through the lens of our own experiences and our own background. So if you're not understanding somebody's cultural differences, if you're not respecting those cultural differences, they are not going to feel validated and they're not going to feel welcome in your company. So it's very, very important to really understand your team. Okay, motivation is huge, and it really depends on each individual employee. You need to know what motivates somebody if you're going to motivate them. Some people are motivated by money, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are motivated by accolades and promotion. We're all different, so you're going to have to figure that out. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You need to find out what's getting in the way of their motivation. So if there's a mismatch between their own values and your values, or their values, their beliefs, and their background and what you're asking them to do, there's a disconnect there. It's not going to work. You also always have to determine if this is something you can address. Sometimes that person is not suited for the job that you have them in. You can certainly train them again and see if that helps. You can do maybe a lateral move into a different position, or you can both come to the conclusion that this is not a good fit. That's okay. I'm actually a firm believer in, if once you are very clear the employee is not going to work for you, that is the time to let that employee go, because they can go do something much more suited to their skills and strengths, and you can have somebody come in that helps you. I used to keep people way too long. It's kind of like having a really bad relationship, but staying in it for the kids, right? So it's like, I hired this person, I trained this person, I paid them all this money, I'm going to just make it work somehow. But we both knew it wasn't going to work. It was a bad fit for the position. And again, the only way to find out the information about your employees is from your employees. Really asking them what motivates you. Really talking to them about experiences in their life where they felt super acknowledged, and listening and saying, okay, this is a person who really, really gets their self-esteem from compliments. This is a person who really, really, really enjoys getting a gift on their birthday. Who knows? Everybody's different. Don't assume that you know your employees if you haven't had that conversation. Okay, so where to start? If you want effective communication in your workplace, you've actually got to start talking to your staff. Whether you have a staff of 1 or a staff of 1,001, you've got to talk to your staff, and you've got to find out what's working and not working. If you have a massive staff, you're actually going to do a lot of this through surveys, right? You're not going to talk, you could, but you may not have the time to talk to everybody. You want to talk to the key players, and the key players are the staff, not always the management, right? So we want to go to the worker bees, I call them, and we want to say, okay, what's working, what's not working? And you're canvassing everybody. So you may have one person who just thinks everything's terrible and they complain a lot. That's not where you're going to get your data from. You're going to get it across the board. And if you're asking the same questions, you're probably going to start collecting interesting data. So your employee's issue may be that nobody ever clearly tells us what they expect from us. And so therefore we feel like we're always failing. The data could be, I never got trained on this. I got promoted to this position, which is great, but nobody ever trained me on what I'm doing. So I have no idea what I'm doing. It could be, there's a person in the practice or the firm or the business that is a bully, and they're really affecting all of us. Whatever it is, it could be you, boss, you're not giving us clear expectations. We don't know what you want from us, and we feel very intimidated by you. Allow that communication. It's very, very important, and collect that data. Also determine for yourself, okay, I'm not happy with my employees or with 2 of my employees or 1 of my employees, and I need to figure out why. Because it's often not the problem you see, it's the problem underneath the problem. So it could be that they are always 15 minutes late, they don't do your work right away, they don't respond to emails immediately. What's underneath that, what you're going to feel is a lack of respect and them encroaching on your boundaries. So your response is going to be to get mad. And again, it could be that they are just not respectful and not a good fit, or it could be that you have not given an executive presence. You have not shown that you are the boss and you are in charge and that these are the rules they must follow. So being really clear on, okay, what isn't working and what's underneath it, and that's what you need to address. You can't force someone to respect you. It's not possible to force somebody to respect you, but you can certainly earn that respect by having clear communications and clear boundaries. Training is huge. You need clear systems to run your business. Basically, most of what your staff does should be on rinse and repeat. It should be clearly laid out in a manual that isn't 1,000 pages, but that is very clear. Or you have videos, you have the SOPs, videos of you saying, okay, this is how we onboard new clients. This is how we handle this issue. In a law practice, this is what we do from the moment we get the first call till the moment the case is closed. These are the exact steps we follow each time, and these are the variants that could happen. So therefore, you are not constantly needing to train your staff, talk to your staff, recreate the wheel over and over again as you get new staff. So have very, very clear descriptions of the problem and how to solve it. Have daily or weekly meetings with staff. If you're not meeting with staff, you're not going to have an effective employee-employer relationship. And obviously have employee performance reviews. Nobody likes them, right? The employees come in terrified. You don't know what to say. You're either the type of boss like me who wants to say excellent to everything, or you want to point out all the flaws. And you really have to get yourself to the point where you can say, okay, I definitely want to emphasize that these are your strengths and these are the growth opportunities. That's what we call them. I do agree with that former employee that using the term problem can be a problem. But there's a time and place for everything. But we look at it as growth opportunities because we believe that our employees can always grow. And my standard is for everybody, and they know that when they're hired, is, are you trainable? So everybody's allowed to make mistakes in my practice. Everybody is. I make mistakes. It's not the be all and end all, but it's how many times you make that mistake and whether you can learn from correction that shows me if you're trainable. So if you have an employee that's coming with a lot of bad habits, it's okay if they can shed those habits and be trained. But if they can't and they're not trainable, then they can't do what you want them to do. So really learning and really talking to them about that. It's very important that you are flexible and trainable so you can learn my systems and my processes. And these are the practical steps to address any concern, any problem, any relationship. You acknowledge and validate. What I'm hearing you say is, I understand this is whatever the problem is. Using very positive, very affirming language. Again, whether you agree or disagree, you can even do this in a political debate. You could be a staunch conservative with a staunch liberal, and you can have an effective conversation if you follow these steps. What I'm hearing you say is X. Then you identify the issue. What's the problem? very often there are problems that you're imagining that aren't happening, or you're missing out on what the actual problem is. If you do not identify the issue, if you do not communicate effectively and listen effectively, you are not going to know what the problem is. You're going to think it's something different than it is, and you're going to use the wrong strategy. So you acknowledge, this is what I'm hearing you say. This is what I think the problem is. Do you agree? Are we on the same page? And then together you collectively problem solve. I'm a big fan with my employees of having them come to me with a solution and not a problem, because I'm open to their solutions. I want to know their solutions. They're probably going to be better served to find the solutions to the work that they are doing every day. Sometimes they don't have solutions. Sometimes the solutions they give are not what I would do. So we problem solve together, and you get the buy-in. Okay, this is the problem. This is what I'm hearing you say. This is the solution as I see it. What do you think? Again, these are employees, so they could disagree with you, but that doesn't mean they don't do the work that you're asking them to do. But you're getting buy-in and you're getting collaboration, which is huge. And then the follow-up is so important. So like we talked about earlier, if you have an employee who's late every day, isn't handing in their work, isn't doing what they need to do, and you say the consequence to continuing with this behavior is X, Y, or Z, and they continue the behavior, you have to implement exactly the consequence that you said. Because if you let it go, they're now being trained that they can violate your boundaries and they can break the rules. Again, I used to be notorious for this, right? I was like, okay, well, they're really good, so I can let this go and that go. And before I knew it, my employee wasn't doing anything that I asked them to do, and the respect wasn't there. They had no more respect for me, and I had no more respect for them. This was early on in opening my own law practice, and she was my greatest teacher. It is not effective to not point out where there are problems, and it is not effective to not follow up on consequences that you have set forth. The other kind of follow-up and follow-through is if you were problem solving and you came up with a new solution, you circle back around, did that solution work? Is this now how we're going to do things? Is this the new standard operating procedure? So important. Ultimately, what you want is a happy team, right? This is what we all want. We want staff that support us. We want staff that encourage us. We want staff that has our back all the time. This is what we want to create in our workplace. This is what we are striving for, because then whoever is getting our services or product is going to get the very best of us and the very best of our company. We're going to keep our employees. We're not going to have so much turnover. We're going to have a better quality of life because we are going to actually enjoy being in our business. Our employees are going to have a better quality of life, and that's going to show. And instead of finger pointing, gossiping, and complaining, you're going to create an atmosphere of collaboration, innovation, and leadership. And that's the key. And the main way to get there is to get over yourself, basically, and to get over your own insecurities, your own patterns, your own things that you're bringing to the business, and look at this as a role you are playing. You are a leader. You have people who are following you. How do you want to come across? How do you want them to think of you? How much respect do you want from them? What ultimately is going to drive your business to extreme success versus you using controlling, manipulation, and intimidation tactics, or withdrawal, avoidance, and disengagement tactics? Because these aren't going to work. Leadership, clarity, confidence, compassion, these are the things that are going to drive you and drive your team towards success. This is what's important in the workplace. And we have about 10 minutes left. And I would love if anybody has any questions. I don't see any yet, but if there's a topic that I did not cover, if there's a scenario that you are dealing with in your workplace that you just don't know what to do about, I'd love to hear if you have any questions. So I can help you problem solve. I can have you begin to think about what would happen if you had a difficult employee. What would happen if you had an employee that kept showing up to work late every day? How would you handle that? How would you reframe the situation so that your communication is now effective so that the response you're getting is what you're seeking. Just starting to play with that and think about that. And I'll see if anybody has any questions. And also, if you want to connect with me while I'm waiting for questions, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I have a website. My specialty is stress management and being addicted to busy, but I love teaching communication skills. I love teaching collaboration, team building skills. So certainly hop onto my social media where I give tips and tricks on how to do all of that.
Thank you very much, Courtney. We very much appreciate it. I learned a few tips and techniques myself. So if anyone has any questions, you can use the question and answer or the chat function.
Stop share. Okay.
All right, we have a quiet crowd today. I think you guys gave us a lot of information to think over. So please, we will send out Courtney's contact information following this workshop. Abir, it was great to have you here. Courtney, as always, fantastic job. Thank you very much. Communication is key, especially now with a lot of us working remotely. So we will send this information following the workshop. Thank you again for joining us today. The sun always shines in Middlesex County. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.